Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited for you to be coming back to the channel as we continue our series on cognitive distortions. Um, for anyone that has just recently subscribed, first off, I appreciate you. For everyone that has subscribed and continues to come back and check out the content, I just want to tell you I appreciate you as well. Um, as always, I look forward to hearing your feedback, different things that may have resonated, questions, like going forward, or your perspective regarding anything that, we just kind of review and talk about. So, like I said, if this is your first time or you're pretty new to the channel, my name's Cameron. I also go by Cam. And so I practice as a resident in counseling. What that looks like is me practicing psychotherapy. Um, and so my job typically entails, working with those that are in immediate crisis. And we just attempt to keep them from having to go to the hospital. Um, Additionally, I may, if I see fit, and I don't think it's going to be harmful for the individual, then I may make diagnosis as well. But for anyone that's ever listened to any of my other videos, I'm very, very careful with that. So yeah, welcome back. All right, y'all. So if you remember in the previous video towards the end, I actually said our next distortion that we're going to begin is going to be jumping to conclusions. And if you look at the title, it used to be a saying that both my mother and grandmother would say. They would say, okay, now you don't want to jump from that frying pan into the fire. And so at times, jumping to conclusions can kind of give that outcome, right? I don't get caught up into the absolutes or any of that because, in order for us to have some of these distortions, it's because at some point they did prove to be true. Okay. It's not like we just automatically start having them. At some point, things aligned and it was like, yep, that's exactly what happened. The concerning part in it is that when we begin to base everything in the future of what is to come on something that happened previously. And like I said, that can definitely increase stress, anxiety, and just our overall outlook can become negative on things and just interactions in life, right? So those jump into conclusion, that cognitive distortion, first off, it gets to be this thing where let's go just for, an easy example. We talked previously about, employment, things like that, getting a job. And if you have this all or nothing thinking. So if we take it from jumping to conclusions, say, for instance, you have one time or a few times, who knows, where you applied for jobs, right? Jobs of your interest, and no one called you. So now going forward, every time you complete an application, your first thought is, well, they're not going to call me back. And anyone, if you've ever experienced that, doesn't even have to be in the example I've provided, but really notice what's happening in your body. What I mean by that is if you pay attention, your anxiety does increase. And you may get to a place where you continue to check and check, like email or your voicemail or phone numbers, did they call back? And you just become hyper fixated on it, right? It's not a good feeling. I would love to hear someone who says, I do this all the time, Cam. And yeah, no, it don't cause me no stress or anxiety. I just spend my life constantly, jumping to conclusions and it doesn't bother me at all. I would beg to differ because then I would say, okay, so maybe we want to avoid that which is, and that's what cognitive distortions do. The stress of things, either we get wrapped up in the stress of it and the anxiety we're experiencing, or we just avoid it altogether for a preconceived, this prediction that has no validity. That if we were to check the facts, all we can do is base it off of sometimes one outcome. Okay. All right. So in that jump into conclusions, cognitive distortion, there are two areas that fall under that. The first is mind reading. Like I said, we're all, dealing with, or we have dealt with cognitive distortions at some point. So say you're walking around at work or wherever you may be, even around family, you might have had an time of contact with that person that was not, pleasurable. It was not, just a good experience. There may have been some conflict. And so now every time you see that individual, the mind goes to, mm, mm-hmm. They probably over there, or if you see them talking to someone else, they probably over there talking about me. That's fine. I'll deal with it. I bet they won't say nothing to my face. Now, I don't know if that really has happened, right? I'm just giving an example. That's mind reading, y'all. If you don't have anything to back up that fact, if you cannot actually read their lips, if they have not approached you and said whatever it may be, where's your validity? Because can we even say that it's reliable? And what I mean by when I say reliable, has it been every time that you had that sort of thought about, what someone was thinking, that you were correct? What happens in the body? What happens, just physically when you begin to sit there and you're just reading the minds of others, or they might have looked at you a little too long and you like, the hell are they looking at? I'm making a joke out of it because I like to keep things light, right? But it's a lot that we deal with when we do even, experience something as simple as one may say is mind reading, right? Just something to be aware of. Like I always say, you may not experience it yourself. You may know someone that does, right? Let's move on. The second one under that jump into conclusions is going to be fortune telling. That means that you are predicting a negative outcome, just predicting what's going to happen, what it's going to look like. Almost like that example of not receiving that call back after you've submitted a job application. So we get all worked up. May not say anything to anyone else, but something's happening on the inside. That's why people sometimes say, oh, stress can kill, because we don't see what's happening, but we can feel it, right? So we're predicting all of these things to happen. Now, like I said, I am not saying that there has not been times where you have made these predictions and things did happen. Your cognitive distortion, at some point, there was a truth. Where it can become, problematic for us is when we apply it to every facet of our lives. Fortune telling, right? Let's look at interpersonal relationships. Because this is the way a situation played out last month, then, oh, this is surely how it's going to happen this time. Mhm. Well, and if it doesn't, then what? Hmm? Just think about that. If it doesn't, then what? Some people will stop themselves and say, okay, I really got to get a grip on this thing because I am getting so caught up into something, first off, that I have no control over. Typically, we don't have control. Obviously, if we're talking about things in the future, there's a lot of things we don't have control over that we become consumed by. And you may say, you know what? I need to stop it. Okay. But what if you don't? What if you don't just get a grip on that thing and stop it? It actually goes into a whole nother distortion, which is why I was saying that we can actually have shelves, bookshelves full of books, narratives, false narratives that we've written. And we are backing each one by distortion after distortion after distortion. Mind reading. We go back to that in interpersonal relationships. Do you really know what someone is thinking? No, I get it, especially a lot of us have different backgrounds and belief systems and worldviews. And as always, I say, I respect that. But with certainty, can you tell me that you always know what someone is thinking? Hell, even psychics at times will say they don't. Well, when we walk in that mindset that we do, now we can actually start writing a narrative within a conversation because our distortion has told us what someone is going to say. Okay. Our distortion, that mind reading has told us, oh, I know they're about to say this. And then when they don't, depending upon how true that distortion has become for us, okay, we still may not even hear what they're saying. I want y'all to think about that. I often talk about effective communication, being able to listen, being able to comprehend, seeking to understand. I'm the first to say that I don't give a damn how many books I have read. I don't care how many assessments I have done. I don't care how many psyche evals I have reviewed. I don't care about how much collateral information I have received prior to someone admitting for that psychotherapy. When I meet with them, I am seeking to understand. I'm not going to go in there with that preconceived notion because that can be quite dangerous, right? Remember, I spoke about how I'm very intentional with not just labeling diagnosis and throwing those things around like I'm passing out free items, in some giveaway. No, I don't play them games. That's somebody's life. I mean, really? Like, labels can be quite damaging for people. But even in the simplest things, right? We can do these, have these same behaviors in our conversations with others. And we just got to check ourselves, like, okay, let me just stop for a minute because I'm not even hearing what's happening because I've already written a narrative based off of something else. Well, if your mind is so focused on this preconceived notion, this pre-written narrative, how can you be present in that moment of the conversation? You're more present in the past. That's where you are. You're present, but it's not with the current. It's definitely with the past. And once again, I'm not saying, right, that there have not been situations where it's like, that's a red flag, right? No, I'm not saying that at all. And I'm also saying that these distortions can have some significant impact, negative impact in our interactions, in our day-to-day, the way we navigate this thing called life. Needless misunderstandings, needless, conflicts that could have been avoided. So for those of you who've just gotten here, briefly, I'll just speak about how to combat these cognitive distortions. Like I've been saying the entire time, we want to check the facts. The thoughts we are having, are they valid? Do you have validity and certainty? Or are we just going with an assumption, right? A lot of these distortions that we talk about, you're going to notice how they all intertwine with each other, which is why you'll hear me say that one distortion can lead to another distortion, and it just spirals, man. You know, we begin to anticipate, like these negative responses from others, that it's always going to be a negative interaction because of one negative interaction, or it could have been more. But does that mean that we can now fortune tell every reaction? Just think about it. As I always say, even if this is not for you, it's just something, for us to talk about, something just to be aware of. For we are all doing this thing called life for the very first time. Be gentle with yourselves. Give yourselves the same kindness that you so graciously extend to others. Be aware of self, because how can we be so aware of others when we're not even aware of self? And as long as we're on this side, we're steady growing, y'all. We're steady evolving. None of us are going to have it all figured out. So be gentle with yourself. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to us, chopping it up again as we continue to explore cognitive distortions. Peace and blessings, y'all.